Hi everyone, and welcome to your horoscope for the week of January 10th, 2022. We are in for an extraordinary week, and of course an extraordinary year altogether. But this week is really important because we have a massive buildup of energy and also a lot of very important key celestial conversations. But it is next week, so the week after, when we're really going to have a really strong energy shift. On one hand, we will be into Mercury Retrograde season. On the other hand, that is the moment when the nodes of the moon change signs on the 17th, 18th of January 2022, where they leave Gemini and Sagittarius axis and enter Taurus and Scorpio. And I will probably have a separate recording both for Mercury retrograde and the nodal shift. And if that wasn't enough, we also have on the 17th a very powerful and emotionally charged full moon in the sign of Cancer. And to even top that up, that is also the period when Uranus comes to a standstill and starts moving direct. And that is really powerful. Because on one hand, until now, all throughout 2021, we kind of experienced the Saturn and Uranus square, which I and every single astrologer out there have been talking so much about. But until now, it was really Saturn who held the upper hand. Saturn in his ancient ruling sign of Aquarius in the Aquarian decan. So basically, Saturn really tried his hardest to keep things the way they are, to preserve everything that it could, while Uranus naturally wanted to destroy it, not in a violent sense. We have to understand this more philosophically and energetically, but of course we saw a lot of violence and rebellion and protests and everything imaginable out there. And this time it is actually Uranus who will start having the upper hand, because the North Node is in Taurus. It really energizes that sign, and it activates Uranus really strongly. And then later on in the year, as we head towards the end of the spring and the beginning of the summer, we will also have Uranus-Mars connections. So this is where Uranus takes over the lead, and this is where the revolutionizing, stepping into the future, the quantum leap, and us being, and please forgive my choice of words, kicked out of our comfort zones, ready or not, like it or not, we had this chance to truly soul search and find our most authentic expression, what we want, who we are, what we desire, who we want to share our values with, etc. But this is where the time is up. Even if we weren't very successful, we are definitely gonna be kicked out from our comfort zones. But this energy is not necessarily that very bad, especially for those people who have been very strongly stagnating for the last 3 to 4 years. This is where Uranus is definitely gonna deliver the fated events on one hand, the opportunities, but none of this is comfortable. So I'm not even gonna lie. We really need to embody our sense of adventure, our bravery, our Uranian spirit, so to speak, because we are definitely going to need it. But of course, the Uranian energy is very cerebral. It really doesn't matter how it manifests in our lives. It's still one way or another stems from our awareness, the way we perceive reality as objectively as we can. And to add to this, we also have a really powerful and extremely strong Neptune and Piscean energy, because Jupiter started its transit in that part of the sky. So we also have a strong emotional, spiritual, deeply psychological nuance to this energy. So different people will react in different ways to that, because there is something that Uranus does for us regardless of who we are and our situation, our setup, it kind of fires up certain kind of anxiety and anticipation from within us. It has a very, very strong effect on our nervous system, our neural pathways. Of course, for some people, this is much more enjoyable because it really, really makes them spontaneous and opportunistic, so to speak. For some people, it's not so good because it makes them like severely anxious in a bad way, where chances are they might need help, natural supplements, etc., etc. So if Neptune and this Jupiter adds to this, for some people that is soothing, that is comforting, that is like a really good coping with anxiety. It actually can turn anxiety into a sense of serendipity, which helps. But for other people, especially those who are really, really vulnerable, and chances are Uranus in Taurus targets their, material lives, money, income, livelihood, physical health, their material conditions, so to speak. And Uranus is very not gentle. Uranus is like a wrecking ball. And if some people are really vulnerable and they are struggling materially, this Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces amplifies the victim. And many times the sense of victimhood, if this is even an acceptable word, is so very strong that it becomes our dimension. And it is so hard to get out of it. But on the other hand, we also have wisdom. Mars in Sagittarius. And this is one of the key aspects which opens the very beginning of the week. We have a choice. Emotions and the way we perceive ourselves, well, ultimately that's not set in stone. We have the liberty to change our state, to change the way we think of ourselves, the way we understand ourselves. And instead of focusing on being a victim, well, we're living and breathing right now, so that means we are survivors. And if we manage to shift the perspective and the state, we already tap into the true expression of Jupiter, king of the gods, who, even though in mythology, of course, was sometimes infidel, was a trickster, he did stir up events every now and then, but he was also known for his generosity, for his mercy, and to find a solution or a compromise even when it was almost impossible. For example, the myth of Persephone or the myth of Ixion, he gave a second chance even when he shouldn't have, even when he knew that he will regret it. He had to do it for the principle of being kind, of being compassionate. So that is the aspect of Jupiter that we really, really need to tap into. And this is where even me, with my Saturn in Scorpio in the 8th house, which kind of means that my luck and my fate, etc., doesn't change very, very often, only a couple of times throughout my lifetime. And even I sensed the miraculous qualities of this Jupiter already. So I am so confident in saying this. If stuff even started affecting me in the most delightful and positive of ways, well then everyone, absolutely everyone out there can truly tap into this energy and benefit from it. And ultimately, to begin the week, this is the higher expression of the Neptune and Mars square, because both these planets are in signs which are very idealistic, which are very, very dreamy. Neptune is a more illusionary kind of dreaminess and energy, while Sagittarius is very hopeful and idealistic in a philosophical way, let's say. So when these two power players are in friction with each other, well, we can either use this strong sense of hope and optimism to empower ourselves, to infuse everything that we do. Mars is the planet of action, with that Jupiterian faith, but at the same time, if we get lost in it, it drowns us in illusion, in fantasy, and our wills are simply not gonna function the way they should, because we're so carried away by the big dream, by this very, very sweet, this honey-like, if you will, Jupiterian vibes. So like always, with every single delicate Neptune aspect, let's be careful not to get lost in the illusion. We have to use this Saturn to also ground ourselves. Of course, everything is possible. We live in a quantum world after all, but even Jupiter has to respect the laws of physics. He can only out-cheat it, but not really go against it, if you know what I mean. And another very important thing, Sagittarius and Neptune also, Pisces, Neptune and Pisces, is boundless. It has no limits. Neptune is escapism, Pisces is substances, Mars in Sagittarius wants to feel good, wants to, high. It wants to keep the high as much as possible. So we really have to be careful now not to overdo any escapism, because chances are it can even turn lethal, because under this aspect we don't know when it's enough. We can't feel it. Neither, our instincts or anything. So we have to be very careful and diligent. And also, Neptune can also be seen symbolically, of course, as the tempter, the devil. So the temptation to escape, regardless if that is substances or movies, computer games, books, fantasy, whatever works for you, it's irresistible. It calls you. There's this temptation to do it, to immerse into it, which of course is fine as long as we know what we're doing and as long as we don't allow ourselves to drown. Including if this Jupiter blesses us with inspiration, for example, flirts, for example, a person who is very kind, very loving, very gentle, that's absolutely fine. It's wonderful, it's a blessing. But that doesn't mean that we have to take it that very much seriously, because everyone is a little bit inspired to be extra nice, extra generous, compliments and extra flirty. And we also have this Venus retrograde season, and we also have the Sun meeting Pluto, which one of its expressions is a big irresistible attraction. So we need to be careful what is fantasy and what is reality. Especially that another key aspect is Neptune sextiling both the Sun and Venus retrograde, who are conjunct. Now this is an absolutely wonderful energy for romance. This is where people just find you. This is where your romantic fantasies can become reality very quickly. An alchemical energy, yet still fantasy is fantasy. Enjoying yourself is absolutely wonderful. Giving and receiving compliments, making other people feel good, other people making you feel good. Experimenting, trying it, giving a chance. Yes, absolutely. It is basically dream come true after all. But when it comes to commitment, wait until Venus goes out from shadow, which is the second half of March. And that might be a moment when you have enough clarity and enough, control over your feelings to make a commitment or not make a commitment. So chances are romance is definitely in the air, and especially at a time where we might not necessarily need it practically. Uranus-Saturn square. Everyone has to be focused on their own breakthrough, material lives, career, health, whatever this Saturn and Uranus square triggers for them. And if just romance pops out from thin air and it kind of envelops you, well, of course, it's like a sweet honey, but it can be inconvenient. So we need to be very, very diligent and patient. Of course, allow ourselves to enjoy and indulge, but when we are faced with the need to make a commitment, a long-term commitment, saying yes to anything, a contract, a job offer, a person, a relationship, we should wait until March so our emotions and the emotions of the other person can crystallize. And if it's not romantic love, if it's job or anything Capricornian of nature, contracts, everything that we sign. We also have Mercury retrograde starting this week. So let's be careful, let's be patient, and let's be aware. Now, speaking about commitments, on the 11th, the Sun is conjunct Juno, and at the same time, the Moon is conjunct Uranus. Moon is feelings, and the Moon is an exaltation in Taurus. So our feelings will be really, really triggered by Uranus. We will want a bit breakthrough. We will want to know the truth. Even if that is some very, very subjective personal truth, we want to feel that we have it in our power, that we are control over it, that we know, that we are aware. And the Sun conjunct Juno is the asteroid of commitment. So around this time, we will really, really process and contemplate what we want to commit to, what we no longer want to commit to. And the Sun is combustive, so it really, really brings this to our awareness one way or another. Of course, one possible expression of this, if it works through Mercury being in the sign of Aquarius at this time, and also in shadow, so it can come through as messages, communication, anything that people share with us. Around the 13th, the Mercury and Uranus square also perfects itself, where of course Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. Mercury can be seen as the lower mind, Uranus as the higher mind. This is all about communication, and this is important communication. That which needs to come to our awareness, may it be documents, any information about our social lives, social circle, other people. And I do sense, because this Mercury is very, very close to Saturn, this is about really practical things like business, like finances, like long-term future plans, investments, anything that we might want to purchase for long-term, like real estate, house, mortgage, credit, banks, anyone that we need to meet, business meeting or meeting a friend or whatever, travels, anything that has to do with basically planning. Information might reach us, and this information might be a game changer, it might be inconvenient, it might actually set the theme for the Mercury retrograde season, which begins the next day, where on the 14th Mercury is standing still in the sky near Saturn, and then goes retrograde the other day. As I said, I'll have a Mercury retrograde recording out next week. And like always, this is the typical Mercury retrograde season because Mercury is in the air sign of Aquarius. It won't stay there because it will retrograde out back into Capricorn. But this really adds to this Mercury retrograde theme, because whatever is going to take place in our lives, it will impact us in a very palpable material sense. Chances are it is definitely going to be about paperwork. It can also be about certain communication between us and authorities, us and an institution, us and school, university, diplomas, examination period, especially preparation, or making very strong choices, especially if you're a student, like what is going to be your subject of choice for your dissertation, for your master's degree, bachelor's degree, a certain very important work that you have to present, scientific research. So for students, overall, regardless of what kind of study it is, even if it's just a course, it's going to be really, really important. It's important for business, for projects, for relation between a company and their customers. It's also very important regarding many people's careers, especially because this Pluto is strongly activated. For a lot of people, this is going to be the period when they have to decide, do I leave this career for good? Am I absolutely sure that I want to terminate it? Am I absolutely sure that I want to change my life this dramatically this year, let's say? Of course, for some people, leaving their careers, emotionally speaking, Venus retrograde is crystal clear by now. They made the choice already, but maybe what they want to do next is not very clear. They're searching for it. They're analyzing. They're trying things out. They're playing with options. They're playing with plans, with their opportunities. They're projecting or creating mental scenarios of how things may possibly work out. Of course, in the Aquarian segment, when Mercury is still in Aquarius, this is where we ask other people. We even search the internet, job sites or career sites, career specialists, counselors. Aquarius is all about the internet, humanity's collective consciousness, of course. Or when it enters into Capricorn, we ask people in higher positions. Like, we actually go to interviews and see what the chances are, see what the options are, see what the opportunities are, what they can offer us, what we can offer them. So this is a really, really important period for those who have been looking for jobs or a career for quite some time now. This Mercury retrograde can be very, very revelatory, especially because it starts next to Saturn. Saturn is the practical. Saturn is work, sacrifice, structure, our daily routines for the long-term future. Also on the 15th, Neptune is conjunct Pallas Athena. So this is tactical energy, how to get where I want to get. And let's say if anything in the human world, so to speak, is not clear yet, it's confused, Mercury retrograde just begins, so we're meant to have a lot of questions. Neptune can offer us a lot of divine guidance. This is where we say, as a human being, my mind is limited, I just don't know, universe, help me. Guide me through dreams, through synchronicities, through coincidences, and Pallas Athena with Neptune, through the coincidental words, speeches from other people, even total strangers. This is where you have a conversation with someone, it doesn't really matter in which context, and they say something, and that word or that phrase, that sentence deeply resonates in your soul. You just know that God answered you, that it was God who spoke through that person. When Neptune makes a key conjunction with Pallas Athena is, after all, the goddess of wisdom, tactics, how to do things the right way, how to serve the greater good in a harmonious way. That's her higher octave, that's her higher expression. And there's that song, If God Was One of Us. Well, this is exactly that kind of energy where God is actually one of us. Let me explain it in a very biblical way. If the Holy Spirit possesses someone, just for that 10 seconds for them to say that key word, well, in those 10 seconds, that person is truly God, if you know where I'm getting with this. So this can be a really, really good inspirational energy when the universe answers you straight to your face. Then on the 16th, we have the Sun conjunct Pluto. Yes, this does take place once every year, but this is a very intense energy. Pluto is the truth. Pluto is that which we find very uncomfortable to look at, to observe, yet we are forced to. And the Sun illuminates. This is where the light is there, so we cannot ignore it. Let me just give you an analogy. You have a black cat, and when you turn off the lights and there is darkness in the room, you don't even have the smallest chance to know where the black cat is in your room. But if you turn on the lights, immediately you spot the black cat because of the contrast. And this time the black cat symbolizes either the shadow, the hard to look at truth, or it can even be a big truth that you have difficulty acknowledging, accepting, even if it's the most positive thing in the world. Like a person who thinks of themselves as unattractive, 10 people tell him you're beautiful, you're attractive, you're absolutely amazing, and no reaction. It just doesn't sink in, it cannot sink in. And under such an aspect, well, something happens where it's exactly life through any means possible holds the mirror. This is who you truly are, accept it, like it or not, you're beautiful. But of course, this is the most positive example. Pluto can be infidelity. Pluto can be where someone has more power over you than it's healthy. The Sun and Pluto conjunction is always difficult for couples. It is always difficult for work relations with a boss, with a manager, with a colleague in a higher position, because they have power over us after all. So the Sun sheds light onto this, and it crystallizes the truth within us. Are we comfortable with this? Do we want to change it? Do we want to strip that person away from their power that they have over us? Or in some cases, if there's a deep trust, maybe the epiphany is that we can allow that person to have power over us because they seek our highest good more than us ourselves, if you know what I mean. So, this energy is very, very personal for each and every one of us, but it sheds a strong light. Now, naturally, Pluto, this can also be a sexual energy, attraction, irresistible charm, someone really, really inspires you, let's say, and you have a massive crush. For people who are single and looking, this might be very delightful. This might be quite invigorating. But for those who are in an established bond, they should be careful who they flirt with, because this can give way to misunderstandings. But of course, Pluto is truth, so even misunderstandings might highlight the frail trust between them and their partners, and that they need to work on this. Now, also at the end of the week, we have Uranus coming to a standstill, stopping in the sky. Its symbolism is greatly amplified. So, regarding what is happening out there in the world, this is quite serious, because this is the moment when Uranus turns outward in an earth sign manifestation. This is where whatever we have been concocting inside of us, contemplating, this is where whatever we were trying to rebel against just mentally, it comes out. It turns physical. The act of rebellion is executed. The very next day we have a full moon. Of course, this is next week's horoscope, but I'm just telling you in advance. Full moon brings out the emotion. The moon is in its home sign of Cancer. This is a Cancer full moon. So that is big. And it holds an opposition to Pluto. That's rebellion, that's revolution, that is protest. And whatever happens in Kazakhstan will definitely radiate, echo, reverberate in many, many other countries in the world. Some big truth might come out. Maybe that the government has fallen. Maybe a big, massive crime is being committed against the people. It is not certain who will have the upper hand, people or the government, but it will shock everyone. And this will be a moment of massive rebellion, especially because this is strong cardinal energy. Eris, planetoid of discord, the freedom fighter, is squaring Pluto from the sign of Aries, sovereignty. And Eris fights for sovereignty regardless of the odds. She doesn't care anymore. She just wants to strike at her oppressors. And if we look at Eris as a collective karmic energy, that's the apple of discord being thrown into the crowd. And we know What happened when she threw it at the wedding in Olympus? The goddesses went berserk. And that might represent an economic collapse, an economic shock, the economy being totally destabilized. It is the Pluto return of the US. So something strong is being brewed. It is just beginning. This is where, when there is a lightning storm but not rain and wind yet, you just know what's coming. Another expression of this stationary Uranus, well, it's earthquakes, extreme weather events, extreme earth events, volcanoes. And at the same time, we must remember that the next day or the next couple of days, the nodal axis is shifting, the North Node is entering Taurus. That puts an even stronger emphasis on the physical Earth in many ways, shapes, and forms. So it can also be like an agricultural disaster. It can also represent Uranus's technology. It can represent a massive technological accident or disaster or something like that. And it's not meant really to harm us. It is meant to bring to our awareness the dangers of technology, the dangers of what we are doing, the dangers of how we are interfering with the earth. And with the North Node in the sign of Taurus, that is the period when Mother Earth has all the cards. That is the period when Mother Earth does what she wants and she serves her own purpose. She serves herself. Many times she doesn't show her compassionate side because, just like with people, there is a time when you have to focus on yourself, on your healing, on your well-being. If you're full of parasites, let's say, of course you're gonna take a hot bath. Or of course you're gonna do everything in your power to get them off of you. Uranus is also god of the sky and wind. So it can be something related to wind, to hurricane, to extreme cold or extreme hot. Naturally, this is also a psychological energy because, Taurus is the five senses also. And the five senses have a lot to do with hormones. Even though, strictly astrologically speaking, Taurus is not directly linked to hormones. But if we look at serotonin or any other happiness or sadness or whatever hormones, well, the five senses are directly linked to it. So it kind of flares up inside of us, but inside our instinctual selves, the inner animal. What makes you happy? What irritates you? And if we add the collective energy to this, the rebellion, the economical instability, people feeling deprived and oppressed, this is the moment when the bomb detonates, when the pressure cooker starts to tear itself apart. But of course, this will be all throughout January and February and the first half of March. And even though this is very scary, even though maybe in some parts of the world it's actually gonna change a whole country, one day you have a certain kind of normality and the other day everything is different. There is still Jupiter's transit in Pisces. That's the cure. That is the hope. That is the big picture. That is where the divine promises us that all of this chaos, pain and suffering, and maybe destruction even, serves a purpose because it has to deconstruct the old order and the old paradigm, what's left of it. Only like this can we start rebuilding, constructing, crystallizing the new, the next, the future, which 2022 is all about. But unfortunately, destruction and creation will coexist. They will have to be good bedfellows, like it or not. And another big theme with this full moon in a sign of Cancer, of course, even though this is next week, and the North Node entering Taurus, and also this Jupiter in Pisces, and also a little bit of numerology, the 222. We need someone in our lives. We need to have someone. Maybe not necessarily romantically for everyone, but we need someone to work with, someone to rely on, even if it's just emotionally, and someone to rely on us. We need alliance in our lives because, most of the times I always say, you are enough for yourself, you can do it alone. You don't necessarily need someone, but in 2022, this is the kind of year when it's really, really advised not to do it alone if possible, because the North Node in Taurus returning to nature, to the simplicity and the imperative rules, dominance even of nature. Human beings are created to be together. Human beings are species who are mostly monogamous. So they have a partner. They live in collectives. They are interconnected, just like, let's say, bees, ants. That is their primal nature that no one can basically deny. And even though the hermit types who have denied this and they function perfectly alone, well, it's because the divine helped them reach that state and be okay with it. And hermits ultimately are not alone because they have the divine as their partner, so they have someone to rely on. And chances are they possess certain skills that are beyond human. So that means they're actually okay with their divine partners. But for the rest of us, it is really, really advised to have someone in your life. And I strongly believe that the karmic forces will help us find that very special someone, regardless if it's romantic, if it's fraternity, sorority, soulmate, associate, business partner, good neighbor, or a community who can welcome us. And of course, for those who already have their alliances, partner, or whatever, that is gonna get stronger. It's gonna work like a charm in a sense that this is when you do something together that will last probably for very, very long-term future, for till your retirement, for example, regardless of what that is. But all of this in the context that the world outside is falling apart, and as Jupiter advances even deeper into Pisces, for some people, yes, that is wish fulfillment, miracle, profound healing, optimism. The divine is alive everywhere, inside, outside. But for other people, it's getting lost in the illusion. It is the mass psychosis becoming their normality, and they will never ever be able to get out of it. And I'm so sorry to say this, but this is the truth. This is the Neptune and Jupiter conjunction making the choice by our beliefs. Those who are hell-bent on seeking the greater one singular truth, either through religion or all the conspiracies, or are heavily immersed into the coronavirus and the government and the legislation and all of that, what is going on in the world right now, that's where they'll stay. That's where the reality will crystallize and you get what you desire, because basically that's a wish fulfillment. If the universe sees that that is what you're focused on, it will think, regardless of what the bigger truth is, it will think that that is what you prefer. You chose to be part of that, so that is what you're gonna live in. If you do something totally else, as in if you're focused on your life story, well then the universe will see that that is what you need to have in your life for a long, long time, to be deeply, deeply immersed into your story, regardless of what that is. If your story is, let's say, like a boat, like a ship, of course it's sailing right now through very turbulent waters, but at the end of the day, when you reach the shore, That's a wonderful story to tell everyone and probably your grandchildren as well. So it's not really doom and gloom. But of course, if you don't interpret the rocky boat ride, the turbulent and violent sea right now as an adventure, but rather it turns you paranoid, it will leave a massive trauma where you will never ever in your life set foot on sea or water ever again. This is where the sea will always be your enemy, not just now in this incarnation, but chances are your next incarnation is working through this ancestral trauma that is going to be created right now. So again, I must emphasize on this. We are choosing our frequency, and this is the last minute when we still have a word to say. So let's make sure that we detach from the mass psychosis, we detach from the illusion and manipulation and the psychological warfare, and we use this Eris and Pluto square to take our power back. And our power is our awareness. It doesn't necessarily mean ignorance, that we close our eyes and whatever happens, happens. It means that we simply don't interpret whatever is going on as ultimate doom and gloom and it's the end of the world and it's a prison, injustice, life is unlivable, or we are imprisoned by aliens or whatever theories there are out there. This is just a phase. Like, let me just make a comparison, even though, it might not be the best one. For some people, this is like the Holocaust, just that it is purely subtle, psychological, and not really the heavy physical one. It is meant to be hard, tough. It is meant to show us the reality of what we have done as a species until now. So we can't expect it to be all rosy, to be all positive and optimistic, because we haven't done such a good job, have we? The atomic bombs, and I think that's enough. I don't even need to bring any other example to the table, because from a karmic perspective, what we've done at that point as a species is unforgivable. So, in truth, we kind of deserve to be erased there and then, but we were not. We were pardoned, but we still have to look in the mirror. But we are a species who has hierarchy, so let our leaders look into the mirror and see the head of the Medusa stirring back at them and let them turn to stone ultimately. For the rest of us, the reflection is, this is how we may not live our lives, with violence, with hatred, with total lack of responsibility for our offensive actions. And it's so simple. For some, they have to turn into stone from the horrors that they committed, while for others, this is where they're gonna teach their children never ever to make the same mistakes again. This is the big picture ultimately. So this concludes this week's horoscope. Thank you so much for listening. I wish everyone a blessed and wonderful week. Until next time, bye for now.